Captain Marvel is one of the most important characters in Marvel Comics for various different reasons. Her conflicts have led her to come across many other heroes and anti-heroes, and not all of them were a fan of her. I'm Adam Andrews, and today on Top 10 Nerd, it's the top 10 superheroes who hate Captain Marvel. Coming in at number 10 is Iron Man. After the discovery of an inhuman precog named Ulysses Kane, Captain Marvel wanted Ulysses to work with the Ultimates in order to preemptively tackle disasters before they happen. But Iron Man opposed the idea, suggesting it was dangerous to take his visions as fact, as it was possible to prevent the events Ulysses saw, meaning his visions were not set in stone. And Tony also brought into question the morality of stopping and punishing somebody for a disaster they could potentially do and might not even know they will do. While technically I think Tony was in the right here, it still split the superhero community down the center and led to conflict. But these two have been butting heads and coming to blows for a long time. It's almost safe to say that they have never really been that great of friends. Number 9, Rogue. The mutant Rogue first started out as a villain in Marvel Comics. She was part of Mystique's Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, and one of their first attacks on the Avengers involved ambushing a recently returned Carol Danvers. Rogue, who was still learning to use her abilities, accidentally fully absorbed both Danvers' memories and her powers. The attack completely drained Carol of her powers and erased her mind, and then, to add insult to injury, Rogue decided that she was immediately going to chuck Carol off the Golden Gate Bridge. Luckily, Spider-Woman was there and was able to rescue Carol Danvers, and Professor Xavier was able to restore her memories, but it wasn't complete. The actual emotional connection to those memories, as well as to her family and friends, was completely gone. Carol remembered things, but it was more like watching a TV show about her life instead of actually living her life. Carol regained her powers eventually, but Carol's life was destroyed by a scared young woman who then had to deal with the consequences of her actions and the harm it caused to both of them. Number 8, Rocket Raccoon. Even though he looks like a little cute raccoon, Rocket is really not very easy to get along with. He's got understandable anger issues, a hell of a potty mouth, he doesn't seem to believe he's a talking animal, and even when he likes you, he has a funny way of showing it. For Rocket and Carol Danvers, these two clashed when Rocket first outed Carol's cat Chewie as a member of the alien species Flurkin. Flurkin looked just like regular old house cats, except for the fact that they're not. They can store entire pocket dimensions inside their bodies, they lay hundreds of eggs, and they can produce massive monstrous tentacles from their mouths that allow them to swallow people whole. So yeah, Rocket was not sure whether he should erase Carol's pet from existence or capture it and sell it, and those were his only two options. While neither of those ever happened, and Rocket and Chewie eventually got along, I think Carol still holds just a tiny little bit of resentment for that. Number 7, Magneto. Magneto, in my opinion, is not a hero. Okay, I just want to say that. He has done the right things a few times, but he's done the wrong things way more times. For example, all the times he has specifically tried to eradicate Captain Marvel. Obviously, with Magneto as a villain and Danvers working with the X-Men for a chunk of time, they were gonna come to blows. That's a given. But Magneto has taken the life of a corrupted version of Captain Marvel before, and then, in Captain Marvel Volume 9, Issue number 9, Carol and Alpha Flight are confronted by Magneto about drones that they were using to keep an eye on him as he was somewhat turning over a new leaf. Sort of. He elevated the conversation to say that the next step of the spying were camps to hold mutants. And then Carol decides she's going to criticize the Master of Magnetism for the way that he compares everything to how his past was entangled with the horrors of World War II Europe. Pretty insensitive from the captain here, just saying. Not really a fan of that. Number 6, Wonder Man. This is kind of going back in time a little bit, and I wouldn't say these two heroes necessarily hate each other. What I will say is they've had discussions. In the Avengers issue 195, Wonder Man and Ms. Marvel faced ideological challenges over their perspectives on gender equality. Essentially, the ex-actor, Wonder Man, was out of commission for a good, decent chunk of time, so that when he was brought back to, he may have had a few old-fashioned points of view. When they clash in the comic, it's because Wonder Man begins talking about how he and Iron Man should have busted into an enemy base to save the Wasp, but before he can finish his sentence, Ms. Marvel assumes he is going to say it's because he and Iron Man are men. And she goes on a tirade about how Wasp is a valued member of the team, and times have changed from Wonder Man's day, and that the female heroes aren't just damsels in distress. And yeah, she's right, they aren't. Which makes it awkward though, when he reveals he was only saying that because they're all friends. But he has made some comments like what Carol was referring to before, which leads me to believe there is some animosity there. Or Or at least there was. Maybe for a little bit. Number 5, She-Hulk. She-Hulk and Captain Marvel share a close bond as teammates on the Avengers. The two are regarded as some of the strongest heroines in the Marvel Universe in terms of sheer raw power. The pair also served together as co-leaders and founders of the all-female team A-Force. She-Hulk and Captain Marvel sided during the events of Marvel's first Civil War, so no, they don't really hate each other, like a lot of the entries on this list, but it was actually the second Civil War where things became a little dicey for the pair. At the beginning of the conflict, Jennifer Walters was all for Captain Marvel's ideals, but she becomes out of commission and in a coma. When Jennifer comes back too, things have kinda changed. Not only is she now gray, but thanks to the ideals Captain Marvel was supporting, it led directly to the passing of Bruce Banner at the hands of Hawkeye, and that was not something She-Hulk was a fan of at all. Carol had essentially taken the fight way too far, and because of that, she lost the love of She-Hulk for a good chunk of time. Number 4, Spider-Woman. Spider-Woman and Carol Danvers, just like Jennifer up above, actually should be really good friends. And they are. Jessica Drew was the one that saved Carol after her interaction with Rogue all the way back when. They're almost as thick as thieves. They're best friends, but still, for a short period in her latest series, Jess was not a fan of the energy-wielding hero, or really anyone for that matter. Jess had been exposed to a serum that made her go a little ragey. After putting up with this for several issues, Carol had enough. Carol trapped Jess in a cage, or more like a restraining pod for the Incredible Hulk, and while this was Carol looking out for Jessica's own good, Jess was raging at the time, and she said some extremely personal and hurtful things about Carol and the fact that she will never have little Carols running around, and that's not okay. She was not herself, but that kind of statement does not come without some kind of anger or resentment, even from a best friend. Luckily, they did make up though, I think. I hope. Number 3, Mystique. Just like Magneto, Mystique, in my humble opinion, is not a hero. She's actually really horrible, but she does have a nice side, and she does do things for a greater good sometimes. More like her own greater good, but you know what I mean. She just does it in a pretty villainous way. When looking up people who hate Carol Danvers though, Mystique is top of the list, and I feel like I have to mention her. It's actually though for a pretty wholesome reason. Sort of. So you know how Rogue did what she did to Carol? Well, that was because Mystique sent her on the mission in the first place, and Rogue wanted to prove herself to Mystique as the blue-skinned mutant had become something of a mother to Rogue. Mystique's better half is another mutant named Destiny, who can see the future with relative certainty depending on the timing of the vision. Well, she had one vision where Captain Marvel makes their darling Rogue's life pretty miserable, and they don't want that for the protege, and just like the way Carol uses Ulysses' visions as fact, so does Mystique, and therefore she hates Carol and wants to see her demise. This is how it goes. Number 2, Medusa. While Tony Stark and Captain Marvel have clashed in Civil War II, the fight was all over an Inhuman who was not really there to be used in the first place. But the Inhuman involved here was not alone. As an Inhuman, Ulysses had friends in the rest of his race. The other Inhumans and one important Inhuman made her thoughts pretty clear about the way Captain Marvel wanted to use a member of her race as a tool to stop potential threats before they are even conceived. That person was the Queen of the Inhumans, Medusa. Put aside the moral argument of whether it's okay to take action against someone who hadn't actually done anything wrong yet, taking an individual with free will and forcing them to use their powers for a misguided goal isn't exactly going to win anyone any brownie points, and Captain Marvel lost all her brownie points with Medusa that day. And finally, in at number 1, the Avengers. I could talk about specific heroes for my number 1 point, but I wanted to try something a little different by talking about a team. Through the years, Captain Marvel has been and not been an Avenger, and every time she was an Avenger, she always seems to feel as though her team was not there for her in the way she needed them when she needed them most. Like, for example, when she was manipulated by her weird, quickly aging son Marcus, and the Avengers acted like it was a good thing. She rejected the Avengers over her resentment towards them allowing the lying Marcus to effectively kidnap her for future defilement at his own hands. And then, right after that, she had her run-in with Rogue, and the Avengers were nowhere to be found except for Spider-Woman, which caused her to rebuke them even more and spend a lot more time with the X-Men. On the flip side of that, as she has grown, she has gone from abandoning the team to leading the team to creating new teams and just floating around the Avengers landscape. I don't think the Avengers hate her, and I don't really think she hates the Avengers, but I think Carol has had enough bad and good interactions for her relationship with teams like the Avengers to be questionable. But that's all I got. I'm Adam Andrews, this is Top 10 Nerd. Thanks so much for watching. I'll catch you all on the flippy flop. Peace out, nerds. Thwip, thwip.